We are here with Roger Stone. It is a pleasure to have you on this morning. Thank you for coming.
Delighted to be here.
The name of my podcast is Justice Uncensored, and I have a passion to see justice in the earth. And I know that you have been a freedom fighter for many years, and I don't really know your backstory. How did you get involved in all of the fights that we are presently in as a people?
Well, in 1964, when I was growing up, living in rural Connecticut, my next door neighbor, who was a woman very active in the National Women's Republican Federation, gave me a book called Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. Even today, I highly recommend this book to anyone who wants to understand the conservative philosophy and the America that we see.
Right.
It's essentially a doctrine of less government, strong national defense, restrained spending, low taxes, and fervent anti-communism. This is what drew me to politics. Before that, I wanted to be an actor. My parents correctly recognized, given my acting skills, I would probably starve to death. Of course, they wanted me to go into a trade, become a plumber or an electrician or a mason or any other of those fine, occupations. But I was drawn to politics. And I see a direct connection between the voter coalition that first began to rise under Goldwater, who, although he lost, began a political realignment in which many Democrats in the South and in the Midwest and the Northeast, blue-collar, working-class Democrats who shared many of our social values, as well as our economic values, began to move to the Republican Party. That coalition would elect Richard Nixon by a plurality in 1968, by an overwhelming majority in 1972. That same coalition came within 1 point of electing Gerald Ford over Jimmy Carter. It then went on to elect Ronald Reagan. It is the same voter coalition that elected Donald Trump. That is, I have never been one who wanted to run for office myself. I was always more interested in the backstage of politics, of the mechanics of politics, of how you actually go about moving public opinion to get people elected. One of the things I find is that an outsider movement, like the Trump campaign, like the Perot campaign, even to some extent the Reagan campaign, brings a lot of people to politics for the first time who have enormous enthusiasm, but no experience and no understanding of the mechanical end of politics. In some cases, they have no social skills, but that's a different question. So that's really how I started. I'm a veteran of now 12 national presidential campaigns, starting with Richard Nixon in 1968, all the way through Donald Trump in 2016. Unfortunately, in 2020, I had to sit out the election because I had been the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt conducted against me and my family by Robert Mueller. If you stop and think about it, I was convicted of lying to Congress. Well, there's a couple problems with that. You can't lie about Russian collusion that didn't take place. We now know definitively between the declassified documents produced by Acting Director of Information Rick Grinnell and the recent revelations by Special Counsel John Durham, there was no Russian collusion. Even Robert Mueller with an unlimited budget and unlimited political authority, legal authority, could not find any Russian collusion. So essentially, I went through this nightmare in which I was charged with a specific purpose of pressuring me to testify against the president, which I, of course, refused to do. It was then that I renewed my faith in Christ, and I hunkered down for the fight of a lifetime. And it is only through prayer, only through the power of the Lord that I'm with you today. It's the only reason why President Trump had the courage and the strength in an election year to not only commute my sentence, but to give me a full, free, and unconditional pardon.
That is all very incredible. Even going back to Barry Goldwater, what is wild about that part of your story is I just met this past weekend Barry Goldwater Jr. at
Yes.
CPAC. And we actually had a great conversation. So that's really interesting. And I'm excited to go back and read the book that you just referenced.
Well, Barry Goldwater Jr., of course, was a congressman from California, multi-term congressman, ran unsuccessfully for the U.S. Senate. He, like me, is a kind of a more libertarian congressman, or libertarian Republican, I should say. He's a great guy. Even looks vaguely like his father.
It's interesting to see the strands that are coming together and are connecting. But as far as this witch hunt goes, you mentioned your faith in Jesus Christ. And I know that without faith, I can relate to being in pretty extensive and serious fights. I mean, anybody who steps out and makes a stand and says anything that goes against the mainstream narrative, we are immediately target, public enemy number one. And I know that with this battle that we are in, we battle not against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. And I personally believe that we are going to see divine intervention and a miracle on a scale that is biblical, that the world has not seen before. But with everything that happened, even to President Trump, it really makes me sad that this is how convoluted and corrupt our great republic has become. And as far as solutions and going forward, what do you see as far as the solutions in taking our country back?
Well, first and foremost, it's important that we not see things in terms of Republicans versus Democrats. That's a Hegelian division that is really designed to fool us. This is a fight between criminals, or I should say traitors and patriots, between insiders and outsiders. There's really only one party in Washington, and it's the Green Party. I don't mean green as in the state Green parties. I mean green as in money and power. So there's no difference between Kamala Harris and Lindsey Graham. Not really, not when you get right down to it. There's no difference between Ben Sasse and the most liberal Democrat senator. There's a permanent bureaucracy in place. It's in place in the Congress. It's in place in the House. It's most certainly in place in the national security apparatus. To the extent that President Trump made a mistake, it was leaving that apparatus in place. He should have cleaned house at state. He should have cleaned house at the NSA. He should have cleaned house at the FBI. He should have cleaned house at the CIA. President Carter did. He should have appointed entirely new men and women who shared his non-interventionist view of American foreign policy. Instead, he left people like the Vindeman brothers in place. Traitors, not heroes, traitors. And in terms of what has to be done, I would commend you to go to RogerStonesPlanForAmerica.com. RogerStonesPlanForAmerica.com. You can go there right now, and I outline a 4-part plan to save this country. First and foremost, the most important thing is mass communications. 2020 is the first time in American history when all mass communications are censored and controlled, whether it is network television, cable television, the internet, most certainly, print media like newspapers and magazines, or whether it is, or soon, text messaging. which is increasingly going to be increased. If we cannot communicate with each other and with everyone else, what are our prospects for ever winning another election? So I think it's very important that that platforms be built that are virtually impossible to deplatform on the internet, which can be done technologically as long as one avoids using cheap plug-in software owned by Google or Apple or Yahoo. If you have to build proprietary source code from the beginning. Mike Lindell, God bless him, tried to do this. I think that he was unfortunately involved with some unscrupulous software engineers who cheated him. He spent $10 million to build frankspeech.com, and it crashed as soon as it was turned on. No, it wasn't hacked by the Chinese. He was taken apart from inside. His genius is that he took all those people who signed up and he turned it into a highly successful, live streaming site. So you can go to Lindell TV, also frankspeech.com. They both take you to the same place, to some of the most dynamic programming on the right every single night, 5 nights a week. It is really taking chicken manure and making it into chicken salad. And he has very successfully done that. But we need more outlets. We need more conservative outlets so people can learn the truth, because the truth will set you free. Secondarily, once you've done that, I think you have the ability to rouse the people, to galvanize the people, to demand free, fair, transparent, and honest elections. Till you have honest elections, we can't bring significant change. I obviously renounce violence, and the idea of civil war is repugnant to me. I'm a political scientist. I'd like to win honest elections to affect the change that we seek. Step 3 is pretty obvious. Our problem today is not screwball left-wing socialist Democrats. Our problem is gutless, feckless, weak-kneed, lily-livered, white wine swilling, country club belonging Republicans. Republicans who've forgotten why they went to Washington to begin with. Republicans who were there to line their own pockets and the pockets of their friends. Republicans who, by the way, in their fundraising, give lip service to sealing the border, getting tough on law and order, spending, crime, and so on. They talk endlessly about all these things. They don't actually do anything about them. They take your money, then they go to Washington, and they go along to get along, or they promote the election of other Republicans who don't see our America first vision. So I think there needs to be a top to bottom house cleaning in the Republican Party. Kevin McCarthy must go. Mitch McConnell must go. There are good men and women in those bodies who should replace them. But I also think this has to happen at the state level. It has to happen in cases of all the party offices. It is essential, in my opinion, for us to clean house in the Republican Party. I left the Republican Party very briefly to become a libertarian when we nominated Mitt Romney, because he was so obviously a fraud. I think I was borne out on that one, wasn't I? Never a conservative. He said he was severely conservative. No one who's a conservative would ever say that they are severely conservative. You might say that you're a compassionate conservative, or you might say that you're seriously conservative, but severely conservative, it has a negative connotation that no conservative would use. The Republican Party needs to be viewed as the best vehicle for our America First vision. It is the party of Lincoln. It is the party of Goldwater. It is the party of Reagan. It is the party of Trump. It is now the party of the middle class. It is now the party of working Americans. It's now the party that supports our law enforcement. I'm not talking about the FBI, I might add. So I think it is vitally important that we clean house. And then step 4 is kind of obvious. We have to nominate the right candidate for president in 2024. My first, second, and third choice is Donald J. Trump. I think he's our strongest candidate. I think he's the only one that can keep the Trump coalition together. There are other names being bounced around. Ron DeSantis, if he keeps his pledge on sending illegals that are being shipped into Florida to Delaware, perhaps. Still waiting for that. It's a great applause line, by the way. It's a great applause line. Still waiting for him to actually do it. If he cleans the voter lists here, where there are at least 1.6 million phantom voters, that'd be another point in his favor. That remains to be seen, in my opinion. One of the great mistakes people make in politics is getting ahead of themselves. I'd worry if I were Governor DeSantis about 2022 when he has to run for re-election before I worried about 2024. Mike Pompeo, out of the question. More responsible for the Russian collusion hoax than anyone else. He is the guy who says Julian Assange of WikiLeaks is a, quote, foreign state actor, meaning a Russian. It's not true. There's no evidence to support that. And Mike Pompeo should be called on to answer for it. He's not an America First Republican. He's an establishment Republican.
With President Trump and him coming back, I am completely on board. I've not wavered with my support for the president. And what I have seen through this whole ordeal is anytime people go through fiery ordeals and things happen, you see who the true ones are, the loyal ones are, and you see the ones that were the fair weather friends. And so whenever you went through your ordeal, how did you handle that? Because I mean, I think about David and Goliath. You know, David used the stone to take down Goliath. You are the stone, and you've been going after giants for a very long time. But we still are people and have hearts. And so how did you handle that whenever you saw people that you thought were friends and in your corner turn whenever you went through your hard time?
It's the most difficult experience that you can imagine. The only time in my life I could think of that was worse was when my first dog died.
Oh.
But other than that, it is an extraordinarily stressful situation where I was vilified, smeared, threatened, framed, gagged, bankrupted, essentially lynched in a Soviet-style show trial, denied my constitutional rights, silenced so I couldn't even defend myself. The financial hardships were extraordinary, but that's all designed to squeeze you to make you lie. See, I already passed 3 polygraph tests, so it's out of the question. I was never going to bear false witness against the president. The Bible's very clear about that in the 10 Commandments, by the way. And therefore, I knew I was staring into the abyss. It is stressful beyond words, but I am still here, and you make a very good observation. It is times like that in which you learn who your true friends are and who the people are who are pretending to be your friends but are not really your friends. People who are looking to your friendship to see what they can get out of it for themselves. So I can count on one hand those who turned out to be true friends. Tucker Carlson would be one. Larry Kudlow would be one. Sean Hannity would be one. Chris Ruddy at Newsmax would be one. I just use those as example. A very, very large number of clergymen, a lot of pastors, black and white, were in my corner praying for me. Prayer has enormous power. People don't understand the power of prayer. As you know, shortly after I was pardoned, my wife of 30 years was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Came as a complete shock to us because she's a very vital, positive, upbeat, vibrant, optimistic person whose health had always been perfect. I mean, she never smoked, she ate carefully, she exercised, but just her entire outlook on life was a very positive outlook. She's not the kind of person that you would expect to fall ill. And the doctors were very, very pessimistic. They basically told us her chances of survival were very, very slim. Today, I can tell you that she is in full remission and she's cancer-free. And you can say, oh, was that chemotherapy? Was that radiation? Was that drug? No, it was none of those things. It was the power of prayer. I mean,
Amen.
she chose to do a mixture of some Western medicine in terms of medications, but mostly holistic and homeopathic remedies, which turned out to be enormously successful. I have no doubt whatsoever, however, that it was the enormous round the globe prayer chains that we were having. Prayer has enormous power. You're right, you have prophets like Kim Clement, the late Kim Clement, or today, Robin Bullock, who tell me that I am indeed the stone referred to in the prophecies, and that therefore I have some larger responsibility, that God has a mission for me. And I think that's true. I don't want to sound like I believe I'm some kind of savior or some kind of saint or some kind of apostle. I'm not saying that. But I am saying I believe my life was spared for a purpose, and that the Lord will let me know what that purpose was as we go along. He's already let me know things that he wants me to do, and I'm doing them. And I think there is some larger purpose. I agree with you when you say that something very big is going to happen here. Something biblical is going to happen. The Lord is all powerful. The Lord never loses. The Lord never lies. The Lord never misleads. And we, of course, are imperfect. We're sinners, and we struggle with the everyday problems of life. But if you live in Jesus Christ, you will live forever. And if you seek to walk in his way, then you will be on the winning side. We've read the Bible. We already kind of know how this comes out. We know that good triumphs over evil in the end. We just don't know how yet, but that will be revealed to us. I recently made the decision to join the Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, even though I was born as a Catholic and baptized as a Catholic, had my first Holy Communion as a Catholic, my confirmation as a Catholic, was married in the Catholic Church. But at this point, I think the current Pope is a communist. I think the church has become corrupted. The church, which was once a great bulwark of anti-communism, with great men like Bishop Fulton Sheen and Pope John Paul. And I think the church has been completely taken over and co-opted. I think that explains the pedophilia that the church is going to great lengths to cover up. And it explains this Pope, who, and I'm not talking about when he speaks ex cathedra, which is theoretically, speaking for the Lord. When he pontificates on political subjects, he's just wrong. He says the Bible opposes private property rights. In fact, private property is enshrined in the Bible in 9 different places. The Lord likes free enterprise. The Lord likes those who go out and work for a living. The Bible's very, very clear. So he doesn't speak for me. I still consider myself a Catholic by baptism, but I guess what's important in the end of the day is whether you believe in the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you do, it doesn't matter whether you're a Catholic or a Lutheran or a Methodist or a Presbyterian or a non-denominational Christian, which is kind of how I feel about myself today. It was very hard to leave the church of my parents and grandparents. So since I'm baptized as a Catholic, I guess I'm technically will be a Catholic until the time that I ride on ahead. But I do think it is very important that now, more than ever, that we look to the Lord for leadership, that we look to the Lord for salvation, because this country is in desperate trouble. And this is not like the 1960s, when you had 2 parties that just had different governing philosophies. They both loved America. They were both anti-communist. One party had different views on spending and taxes. They wanted to spend and tax a little more, regulate more. The other party wanted to spend less, tax less, and regulate less. Both parties believed in a strong national defense. Both parties believed in an internationalist foreign policy. Today, you have a ruling class of neocons who dominate both parties. They are looking for foreign war. This adventure in Ukraine is outrageous. The propaganda coming out of Ukraine boggles the mind. The idea that Putin wants to inhabit Russia and insert a puppet government to restore the faded glory of the Soviet Union doesn't even make economic sense. Vladimir Putin has invaded because he's tired of being threatened by the specter of Western missiles on his border, and evidently 15 bioweapons labs that are built in the country funded by the US. We've already seen the damage that can be done out of Wuhan. So I think he's acting to defend himself. It's the extent to which he's vilified now is amazing. I'm going to be very clear. I'm not a Putin fan. I have relatives who were mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. I hate the Russian system. It's a brutal, totalitarian system. He's a killer. There's no question about that. But Ukraine has been used as a pocketbook for the ruling elite, has been used as a money-making scheme for the Biden family, and before them, the Clintons. And that's why they're struggling so desperately to keep control of it. The level of corruption in recent Democratic administrations pertaining to Ukraine is one of the reasons Paul Manafort went to jail. Paul Manafort beat them in a Democratic election. Let's be very clear. We staged an illegal coup there in 2014. Whether you like Yanukovych or not, and he was not a good guy. He was corrupt as hell, but he was elected. By the way, every president of Ukraine has been corrupt, including the current one, and the one before that, and the one before that, and the one before that. Nobody's hands are clean here. So I pray for the Ukrainian people, but I also pray for the Russian people. I pray for a minimum in the loss of life. And I hope this gets resolved. It could get resolved tomorrow if the United States were to let the Ukrainians agree not to join NATO, or at least if they join NATO, not to put missiles aimed at Russia in their country and close these bioweapons labs. I think the entire matter could be resolved.
I think so too. And I saw on, I want to say it was Fox News, they interviewed a lady and she was out of Ukraine and said that Ukraine was fighting for the New World Order and a shield for the euro. And I was like, if that isn't just in a nutshell what we're seeing, but it was fascinating for me to see it because we know all of the propaganda and all of the fake news that comes out, but when they actually tell on themselves, it's quite fascinating to me. But you hit on some things, even with the pedophilia in the church. See, the reason why Justice Uncensored, I'm doing this, the scripture that this channel is based on is Amos 5:24. Let justice roll like a river and righteousness like a never failing stream. And that is actually my story. My stepdad was a pedophile. And there was a perversion of justice in my case whenever I was in the seventh grade. He was charged, but conveniently the charges were dropped because of the good old boy system. And from that point, I was always a fighter, but I always I wanted to fight for justice and I couldn't stand to see people mistreated. And so when what I do is very much a calling. And I have a passion to see things done because we've got the social justice warriors in the streets, that are parading through. The ones that aren't paid by George Soros might have dealt with some injustice, but they're handling it the wrong way. But I know that there is a righteous way to go about these things. And if you want to see change, you get involved in the process. And with everything that we're seeing globally, with it's like everything is intensifying and heating up. And what I think is amazing about this is people who have passively sat by and done nothing, now all of a sudden they are inspired to actually get involved and do something. And so I think, everybody's very doom and gloom, but I am extremely excited because I feel that we are sitting in a very key part of history. And I completely agree with what you said, that God has for sure kept you here for a purpose. And I truly believe that your greatest works, the things that God is calling you to, you haven't even entered into it yet. And I do feel that from your experience and from your walk and from your even trials that you've walked through throughout the years, you've got so much wisdom even in how to navigate these battles. And I just want to say thank you for staying the course and continuing the fight and not retreating whenever you were completely surrounded by enemies. And I wanted to ask you in closing for the people who are facing these giants and they're facing these impossible situations, what would you tell them, those people right now?
Well, first and foremost, pray. Prayer has real power, particularly when many people get together to pray together. Uh, I cannot underestimate the importance of prayer. Secondarily, you're absolutely right. People need to get involved. There was a mayor's race in Oklahoma City several weeks ago, won by an ultra liberal. 5% of the electorate turned out. 5%. That's disgraceful. You have no room to complain about gas prices or the lack of food in the grocery stores if you're not participating, if you're not registered and you don't vote. You really have no room to complain at that point. Lastly, I would urge you to take anything the US government says, particularly the Justice Department, certainly anything said by CNN or MSNBC, with a total grain of salt. The odds are overwhelming that whatever they're telling you is false. These are not news organizations. They're propaganda fronts posing as news organizations. I'm battling right now with the Washington Post that seeks to smear me yet again. I still face 6 ongoing, totally false, totally groundless, totally baseless civil lawsuits filed against my wife and I by hysterical leftists who can't get over the fact that I'm still breathing, that I didn't die in some prison camp somewhere, which was the idea that Mr. Mueller had in mind. So it is important. If you want to help me, you can go to stonedefensefund.com. By the way, my legal bills are astronomical, but I won't settle any of these cases. By the way, I once had 17 of them. I have prevailed in 11. I have 6 more to go. There's an ongoing effort to associate me with January 6th. Sorry, wasn't there. Don't know anything about it. Big story in the news today that one of the guys who was in the voluntary security detail that I utilized on the 5th, traveling from my hotel to a legally permitted event to speak and back, was involved in illegal activity at the Capitol. That may be, but just because I met him doesn't mean that I know anything about it or that I was involved in it in any way. I put those in the national media on notice. Anyone who reports that I was involved in any way or had advance notice in the illegal actions at the Capitol on January 6th is going to get sued for defamation because it is untrue. Yet you can go to Twitter right now. There's 100 people saying it. Oh, this is the end for Roger Stone. This guy, Joshua Jones, I think his name is, he pled guilty. He's going to roll on Stone. No, there's nothing he can say that would be true. First of all, I don't expect that. But secondarily, there's nothing he could say that would be true or accurate. The Bible's very close, very specific about bearing false witness against thy neighbor. I sleep well at night because I know I had nothing to do with this. And in fact, it would have been counterproductive. What were we there for on January 5th and 6th? We were trying to get a 10-day delay in the certification of the electoral votes so that we could get a greater examination of the voter irregularities in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. That's not illegal. It's not seditious. It's not treasonous. It's exactly what Hillary Clinton tried to do in 2016, by the way. She wanted to make a special presentation to the Electoral College. We didn't jump up and down and say that's treason. So the people who broke into the Capitol, while I have great sympathy for those who are currently unfairly incarcerated under terrible conditions, solitary confinement for trespassing, really? That's a bit much, don't you think? And if you hear the specifics of their way they're being treated, it is really horrific. I mean, stomach turning. That's why one of them committed suicide day before yesterday. But that said, those who broke into the Capitol, that was counterproductive to what we were trying to achieve. I've been accused of a lot of things, but stupidity is not one of them. And that actually hurt our cause.
Agreed. I mean, there was so much that happened that day on the grounds, and we've seen a lot. We know that there, just like a lot of these things, it was a setup, and the way that the police moved and moved barricades, and we saw a lot of the people that were doing the horrible things with vandalizing were actually Antifa and some of these other groups that came in and infiltrated. I mean, the whole thing was just really sad, and the because it was a peaceful gathering for a lot of patriots came in to hear the greatest president in my lifetime, and I believe maybe even since George Washington speak. And so, yeah, that whole situation is ridiculous. And I have a lot of friends who have gone through a lot of harassment because they were just there. I mean, it like didn't touch the building, didn't do, they were just there. And it's another hoax, and it's really sad, but I believe that we are going to see a lot of victory, like mass victory. And a lot of these things that have fought us for a while, I just feel that the tide of the battle is going to turn, and I'm always extremely hopeful and excited to be a part of what is happening right now.
Well, I pray that you're right. I think that you're right. Uh, we are, as a country, we're in desperate trouble. We have no leadership, or more precisely, the Chinese completely dominate our leadership. For those who have not read it, this terrific book by Peter Schweitzer entitled Red Handed explains completely how the Chinese have infiltrated every strata of our society, academia, business, certainly government. They've bought off the first family themselves. Joe Biden has taken in a huge amount of money from China, sold out our interests. And this constant demonization of Russia, when in fact China is our greatest adversary, China doing more damage to the country than anyone else, it almost turns the stomach. It really does. Um, I share your optimism, though. I realize how difficult the path ahead is. I'm getting sick of being constantly of the constant use of guilt by association to try to affect me, to try to connect me to the events of January 6th. To me, this is in a certain sense a compliment, and it means that as a warrior, they fear me. I've beaten them in election after election. I totally understand their game. They got me off the playing field in 2020, and I think it showed, in all honesty. And therefore, they would try to wrap me up again in something I literally know nothing whatsoever about. Let me say it once again in case they're not listening. Any claim, assertion, or even implication that I knew about or had anything to do with the illegal events of the Capitol on January 6th, or any other illegal events anywhere on the face of the planet that day or on any other day, is categorically false. And any media outlet that prints otherwise as an absolute fact is going to get sued for defamation. I'm tired of being a punching bag. I'm tired of people putting words in my mouth. I'm tired of people taking partial quotes, as was done in a recent court filing in DC. Take half of Stone's quote. I said at one point that I thought the president should appoint a special counsel to look into the election, which might help preserve his staying in office. Stone said Trump needed to preserve his chances of staying in office. Perfect example. Take a quote, use half of it, and give it a whole different meaning. The media today, they're corrupt, they're evil. As my friend Sean Hannity likes to say, journalism is dead. It is dead. Unless you are watching InfoWars or Breitbart or OAN or Real America's Voice, there's a very limited number of outlets where you can go to get the, pardon me, stone cold truth. Speaking of which, you can go to stonecoldtruth.com if you want to see my videos and what I'm doing every day in terms of content and the things I'm writing and thinking and saying. You can go to store there, by the way. You can go to the shop and get your very own Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt. They are iconic. You're going to want one to pass on to your grandchildren. They come in all sizes. I think we've just come up with tank tops and so on. We have crop tops for ladies. You might want to go there. You can also get any one of my 5 best-selling books: The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, New York Times bestseller, Tricky Dick, The Rise and Fall and Rise of Richard M. Nixon. My all-time personal favorite, The Bush Crime Family by Roger Stone. The Clintons' War on Women, which is the definitive expose of the most corrupt couple to ever inhabit the White House. And then, of course, The Making of the President 2016, which is kind of the inside story of how Donald Trump pulled off the greatest political upset in American history. So I urge you to go there. If you want to help me fight the ongoing legal fights, where the Department of Justice, by the way, is suing me and Mrs. Stone in a civil action over our 2007 taxes. Yeah, it boggles the mind. Hunter Biden takes in hundreds of millions from China, Russia, and Ukraine. He has no tax case against him. But they'd like to know, Stone, you spent $7.36 in April of 2007. What was it for? I bought a bologna sandwich. Who knows? I mean, it is so absurd so as to be ridiculous. But if you want to help in those legal fights, you can go to stonedefensefund.com, stonedefensefund.com. I would ask if I didn't need the help, but I do need the help. So God bless you if you can help me out.
Well, God bless you. And I am going to personally continue to pray for you and for your wife, for your whole family, that God keeps you strength in this, gives you strength and keeps you strong in this battle, and continues to connect you with those that are actually going to help you. And I feel like there is this amazing team of people that are being assembled, the ones that have said yes and will actually stand up and fight. And I'm just very grateful. And it's such a privilege to have this interview with you today.
Well, Cassandra, I wish you the very best with your new podcast. I know it's
Thank
going to
you.
be a massive, massive success. And I hope that this helps get you off to a strong start. Thank you for having me today, and God bless you.
Yes, sir. God bless you too. Thank you.